This incident happened several years ago when I was living with my ex-boyfriend. We had recently moved into a 2-bedroom house and were in the process of turning it into a comfortable home. As there was only one bathroom in the house, we converted the back bedroom into an office. This made it easier for our guests to access the restroom without having to go through our bedroom in the middle of the night. It was roughly a month since we had moved in when the incident occurred. My ex was out with his colleagues, and I was home alone, passing the time watching TV and having takeout for dinner. A few times, I heard some strange noises, but whenever I tried to focus on them to figure out what was causing them, they would stop. It got later and I decided to go upstairs and use the computer for a little while before heading to bed. At this point in time, we hadn't had our phone lines installed, and I was still on a pay-and-go phone, which had run out of credit. I basically had no way to communicate with anyone whilst I was in the house that night. So I'm sitting in the back bedroom with only a small table lamp on, that barely forms a glow whilst I'm tapping away on my laptop, when I heard noises again. It started as a light rattling noise, really faint to the point I had to strain to see if I was really hearing it or imagining it. I shut my music off, and tried to figure out what it was. Then I went into our bedroom and looked down at the front door, but no one was there. Then I went back into the back bedroom, but I couldn't see much out of the window. We had a small yard with a high brick wall and a solid wooden gate, so there was no light coming in. But from what little I could see, there was nothing out back either. I sat back down and switched the music back on. Maybe 10 minutes later, I heard an eerie screeching sound like metal on metal, again very faint, as if whatever was making it was trying desperately to be quiet. I was getting more than a little freaked out by this point, so I went into our bedroom to retrieve a heavy iron rod that we had found in the back of the built-in wardrobe. I didn't switch on any lights as I didn't know what was going on, and didn't want to alert any possible intruder to my location inside the house. Remember, I had no way of calling anyone, and I was getting more than a little concerned someone might actually be in my house. I made my way back into the office/bedroom, and closed the door as quietly as possible before bolting it, and lodging a chair under the handle. Nothing more happens for a good 20 minutes or so. I start to feel a little foolish for letting myself get worked up, and put it down to it being my first night alone in the house. But I didn't switch the music back on this time, which was lucky because I started to hear a sound like two people whispering, both male voices. They didn't sound like they were coming from inside the house though. I had the window open ever so slightly, and the sound seemed to be floating in from there. I headed into the bathroom to see if I could get a better look into the alley that the house backed onto. The room I was in the bathroom formed an L around the yard with the bathroom extending further out. I climbed up onto the ledge, and inched the window open to try and see out into the alley. I couldn't see a thing, but the whispering was louder, and coming from directly behind my gate. I couldn't hear whole sentences, but heard enough to surmise whoever these men were they'd seen us move in, and had seen, we had quite a lot of valuable equipment, guitars, computers, TV, games, consoles, etc. I imagine they'd seen I was home alone, and been waiting for me to go to sleep to try and get into the house. I stayed perched there for what felt like an eternity until what seemed like the loudest thud in the world echoed up to me. They grew tired of trying to be stealthy, and one or both of them were throwing themselves at my gate, trying to break it down. I could see it shuddering under the blows, and could only imagine how large these men must be. I'm a tiny girl, and at that point weighed somewhere around 105 pounds. As you can imagine, I was white with terror as I watched my gate groan under the stress. I sat clutching that iron rod trying to think where I could hide from them. Suddenly a glaring light blinded me. At first, I panicked, and dropped out of sight thinking they were shining a torch at the back of the house, but then I heard barking and shouting. I peeked out again and saw the house, which was across the alley from us, had a floodlight installed and it was illuminating both their own yard and mine. I heard grumbling and cursing and then 2 sets of footsteps hurrying down the alley. I stayed locked in that back bedroom until my ex-boyfriend drunkenly rolled in at about 4 a.m. I didn't sleep a wink at night, and when I went into the yard in the morning, my gate was hanging by one hinge, allowing easy access from the alley. When I looked at the back of it, The keyhole was covered in scratches as if someone had tried to force the lock. If they hadn't woken the house behind us, I dread to think what could have happened. This incident happened at my house during the nighttime, when I was about 12 years old. My dad would work the graveyard shift at his work, and since it was the weekend, I had stayed up most of the night. It was somewhere between midnight and 1 a.m., and my dad had told me to lock the doors and to go to sleep, which I did. I went to my room and finally went to sleep, but only for about an hour. At around 2 a.m. I woke up to the sound of knocking on my back door. It scared me awake. After taking a few moments to process what I heard, I decided it was probably just my dad knocking on the door. Maybe he just forgot something. Despite my exhaustion, I assumed that was my dad who had a key to the house and would let himself in, so I didn't bother getting up to open the door. But suddenly the knocking stopped and then resumed at a different spot, the kitchen window. I tried to convince myself that it was just my dad. But still, it didn't make sense since he always had a key. Feeling uneasy, I decided not to answer the door and waited for my dad to call me on my phone, which was nearby. The knocking started again, but this time at a different window. I was filled with terror, too frightened to even consider checking who was outside. The incessant knocking continued, and then it moved to my front door with even greater intensity. It was then that I realized I couldn't move. I was paralyzed with fear. I couldn't speak, scream, or even move a single muscle. As the knocking drew closer and closer to my bedroom window, where the see-through curtains revealed my vulnerable state, my heart sank. Despite my efforts, I was unable to move or act. I felt helpless, consumed by fear. My eyes darted towards the window, and my heart skipped a beat as I saw a man with a dark ski mask peering through it. The figure was tall, and I could barely make out any details in the dark, but I think the mask had a skeleton design on it. Then the man tilted his head slightly, and I tried to scream, but no sound escaped my lips. I shut my eyes tightly and repeated to myself that it wasn't real. When I opened my eyes, the figure had vanished, and I breathed a sigh of relief. Suddenly, I heard a loud whisper saying, "I'll cut you." Everything came to a halt. After a while, I was finally able to move again, but I couldn't sleep for the rest of the night. It didn't feel like a dream at all, and since I had never experienced sleep paralysis before, everything seemed frighteningly real. I don't know what happened, but I hope to never experience anything like that again. It was one of the most terrifying moments of my life. I believe it was real, but since I was alone at home, no one could confirm my story. The next morning, when my dad returned from work, I asked if he had come back earlier that day and knocked on my doors and windows, but he said he hadn't. This happened a couple of months ago when I was home alone. I live in a flat that only has 3 floors, and it doesn't have a lift. So if you live in the 3rd floor, you have to walk all your way up the stairs. This situation happened at midday, while I was chilling at home and my mom was picking my sister up from school, so that meant that I had to let in the man who stops by every Thursday selling water containers. The thing is that he is supposed to transfer the containers by 2 p.m., the time my mom specifically told him to be here, because otherwise no one is home. But on this day, he arrived at 12 p.m. and he rings the doorbell. I tell him on the intercom that we need 2 containers and go downstairs. Once you go downstairs, there is a really long hallway until you get to the front door of the building. I make some small talk and give him the money, to which he tells me to not worry because he will take the containers upstairs. I tell him that I can handle it, but he keeps on insisting. While we are going upstairs, he starts to ask me questions like how old I am, why I wasn't at school. Red flags went immediately off. I answered that I was about to go to work, so I definitely don't go to school. I will never forget how uncomfortable and vulnerable I felt that time. He places the containers in front of my door. So I told him, "Well, let me walk you back to the door downstairs." And what he answered still makes me mad as hell. "Oh, I wouldn't mind to be stuck here with you." Are you kidding me? As if that wasn't creepy enough, he then asked where my mom was. She is inside helping my dad. I lied. This man could be my dad, and he was hitting on a woman he thought was a schoolgirl. It really couldn't get any more disgusting. That walk on the long hallway was the slowest I had ever had. I couldn't wait for him to get out of my building. I was shocked, mad, and felt dirty. I don't know why I said bye. He had the nerve to kind of hug me, and I shut the door on his face. I basically ran up until I felt safe in my flat, which I didn't. I was turning on the shower tap when my doorbell rang, not once, but 5 times, and not the one downstairs. Yes, the one upstairs. I locked myself in the bathroom until my mom came back and I blurted out what had happened. You know what the worst thing is, besides the way this creepy man behaved, it's that my mom told me I was overreacting. I was so angry and disappointed that I didn't talk to her until I came home late at night. I told her to be extra careful if my 12-year-old sister finds herself in this situation to not open the door to this man under any circumstance. A middle-aged man with good intentions wouldn't assume you go to school, ask you where your parents are, and tell you that he would like to be stuck in the building with you. He still comes every Thursday at 12 p.m., despite my mom telling him there's no one at home.